Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of One Vision. This is Theo, your host for today's episode. Joining us today is somebody, gosh, I had met quite a few years ago, let's put it this way, but his life and my lives have been intertwined somehow by a mutual friend. Without further ado, welcome to our podcast, Sean. And for those of you listening, in case you would like to follow Sean, you can look up Sean Scott, SVP Partnership and Personalization at US Bank. Otherwise known as, you have a lot of other stuff going on. You've been on blogs, you write about various things. Well, welcome to the show, Sean.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's definitely one of my key milestones this year. I'm so excited to talk to you and your listeners.
Thank you. How many years has it been since we met in person? 2, 3?
I think in person it's been 2 years. I believe it was Money
Okay.
2020, but like you say, we've got a intertwined story that goes back farther than that. And I was
Quite
even
a
trying to
bit.
do some research and be like, actually, when did we first meet? And I don't know that I could come up with that answer, but
I think it has been at least 10, 15 years,
yeah.
maybe something like that. Yeah, it's been a while. Anyway, for those who might not be familiar with what you do, can you give us a quick recap on what you have been busy with?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working where innovation meets execution. So
I
at the
love that
bank,
tagline.
I've been leading digital transformation initiatives at US Bank with a human and digital focus. And what that means is modernizing the client experience so people can bank how, when, and where they want. And whether that's do it with you or powerful do it yourself digital tools. I'm really passionate about blending strategy, tech, and design to drive financial wellness and really simplify our customers' financial lives. Really, that's really at the end of the day. Recently, that's meant launching a bank in a box experience. Obviously, like everyone else, experimenting with AI and supporting teams as a coach player to turn big ideas into real results.
I was wondering how long it would take for us to touch the AI word, I guess 2 minutes. Bank in a box and AI. Bank in a box. Wait, who came up with the name Bank in a Box?
Well, that would be our. I don't know who. So, from a literature perspective, I'm sure there's those who claim
Oh,
at U.S.
always.
Bank it'd be my leader Ankit Bhatt.
That isn't. That is actually pretty cool. Has a ring to it. Well, so you talk about consumer financial wellness, things that you're passionate about. In the last 8 years, you've been with the bank, and I remember this. You talk and write a lot about digital banking trends, all of that. So, what surprises you the most throughout the journey and throughout what it takes to get consumers to where they need to be?
I think there are like sort of three stories that really stand out when I think of sort of those aha moments. There's many more, but these are sort of my favorite. And as I was sort of evolving or iterating as a sort of a person that works in the financial industry, these really sort of stood out to me. I think first, how digitally savvy customers are, right? I think that really stands out. Two, how quickly customer votes with their engagement, and that is a lesson that I not just take to myself, but really sort of at the top of my lungs, sort of scream at my at sort of my peers and my leaders. Right? It's not about just building, but are we building the right thing? And then lastly, it's like regardless of sort of what your income is, everyone wants their money to stretch. Everyone wants their money to do more. Um, and I think if I were to go back and you know, a couple of personal experiences is when I first started at US Bank. One of the first things we do is send sort of our new folks to branches, right? It's not enough to look at sort of surveys. It's not enough to sort of look at the dashboard, but it's really important to get sort of hands-on experience talking to customers. So I went to, I'm in the Minneapolis area, so I went to several Minneapolis area branches. Um, and early on, one of the things I've always, you've known me for 10, 12 years. I've always been digital first, um, and I assumed, like many, I think, like the younger you were, the more digital you'd be. But after like more than a few handful of real conversations with customers, I realized that the mobile phone was a lifeline for customers of all ages, whether it was a grandmother talking about how she kept in touch with her daughter and their kids by sort of looking with Facebook, or checking on finances, or even having some fun with solitaire, right? So what I learned is like regardless of age, mobile was going to be a central driver. And like many in digital, I sort of some of those assumptions kind of just faded away after 5, 6, 7 conversations like that. I think having said that, they're not only savvy, they're a little what I call ruthless, right? So it's kind of, I think we probably remember 2007 and the iPhone and what a monumental event that was. And like in some respects, that was like yesterday, but in some respect, it was also like it feels almost a decade because of how just quickly sort of innovation has sort of followed, right? But it's not just sort of tech and I would say and specs that innovate. Customers are also ruthless. And as a product manager, especially a digital product managers, I know that customers will vote with their engagement. One of the things when we launched the Goals Portal, it started as an experiment. It was let's get something out there as quickly as possible so we can start gathering feedback. Um, Customers were a core part of that sort of that advisory sort of a voice, but we learned really quickly what worked and what didn't. And thankfully, you know, it wasn't. In some respect, we learned that it wasn't about being first to the market. It was about um, are we serving a purpose? Are customers finding value? When we got that right, is when customers really engage with that tool. And today, right, we're incredibly savvy in that sense, and we constantly look to our customers to make sure that hey, what we're putting out is providing the value they're looking for, right? So that was the second lesson, and I've talked, um, I've mentioned that again, surprisingly, right? You think someone that's living paycheck to paycheck versus somebody that's thinking about their sort of their quarterly bonus are very different, but in some aspects they share some of the same things, right? Which is they all want their financial lives to be simpler, right? It's easy to say, um, and one of the great things about US Bank and about what I love is the amount of energy we put towards research. And one of my favorite sort of research or customer research is brainstorming with our customers, right? You get 5 to 8 folks in a room for a long period of time, try to feed them, ask questions. But what I found out was like whether sort of they were just starting out in their lives or they were really well off, everybody wanted their financial lives to be simpler, and everybody wanted sort of a dollar to feel like two, right? So those were 3 things really, that 3 aha moments that I keep going back to. I keep talking to my peers and leaders about, and I think if I were to wrap it all up, I think the importance of, and I'm going to say AI for the second time in a few minutes, sort of regardless of the advances, if you will, we need to continue to be customer obsessed, customer centric.
Your story reminds me of an exercise I did quite a few years ago. We went to a few check cashing places and tried to understand how would someone who gets paid and without access to a regular bank account, how do they live their lives? How do they get money? And how do they support their day-to-day activities? And it wasn't until that I went through that exercise, because like how you always read about things and you say, oh, there's a cost to go to one of these places, cash your check, and da 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 da. But until you actually go through it, it was hard to imagine how immensely difficult and time consuming it was, right? And then you start taking a step back, thinking about people who live those lives, who do that day by day. And that's when you can start peeling back the layers and see, okay, where can we start making changes to make it easier? It's the empathy, it's the being there. There's a lot of that I don't think we could replicate in the digital world. It's still, as you say, to be customer centric, to be customer obsessed, to understand how they do and what they do. I think that's immensely powerful.
I agree. I think one more story I would say is, as sort of, you know, whether you want to call us product managers, folks that create, folks that craft, our number one job is to empathize with the, sort of with whom we're building the item for, the initiative for. And it's not impossible, but the richness of those stories you gather by just speaking to individuals, whether that's remotely, in person, is just used so much more. It's so much richer than what a survey brings up, right? I think a quick story there was I was talking. I was, like, I'm not fancy. I get my haircuts at Great Clips, and we were talking. I was talking to my hairdresser there, and she was talking about, she doesn't bank with U.S. Bank, but she was talking about how sort of early payday helps because if you, for some bills that are due on the, some bills are due on the 15th, and depending on sort of what the accounting rules or how exactly or when sort of that transfer hits, that transfer may not hit till the 16th. So early payday for her was not that she was going to spend it early, but she was assured that she could pay her bills on time and therefore not get a late fee. So that was another sort of aha moment, which again, I think if you look at, and I think you want to get as much information as possible. So survey, dashboard, engagement metrics. But if you have the luxury, if you can talk to people, that's probably one of my number one sort of suggestion is to get out there to really understand sort of like that richness of the fabric that is what we call lives, and that provided me with a different perspective on, okay, hey, it's not just there, folks want, they want access. One of the reasons they want to access that money earlier is because sort of traditionally, your paycheck may not, get there on the 15th, and therefore there are late fees. And sort of back to the example of everybody wants $1 to feel like $2, right? They want to use that towards things that they value, not late fees.
Absolutely. Talking about things that they value, right? And earlier you talk about customers voting with engagement. You need to build something that actually resonate and is useful, and they will use it, adopt it. But in that process, though, inherent with that, there's the element of trust, because they have to trust you as an institution to give the product or the service a try. How do you know what customers want or anticipate what they need to do? Because you brought up the point about Steve Jobs in 2007 when the iPhone came out. One of the thing, that he was like, okay, so this is something that plays music. This is also a camera, and by the way, this also makes calls. A lot of these things we didn't. I don't want to say for everyone, but a lot of the use of it is things that we didn't know we want. We didn't know we need until, the opportunity presents itself. So how do we go about doing that?
Well, and I think the Steve Jobs is a great example of sort of trust and innovation aren't opposites, right? They go together. I think most customers just want finance to work. They want it to improve their lives. They're not looking for us to chase trends, right? And I think that's why I ask, hey, will this new feature lift a real weight off of our customers? Or are we just chasing something to say we've launched something? If it solves a core human need, like better money guidance, less stress, avoiding fees, or even something as simple as easier navigation or a quicker login, right? We go for it. We obviously measure everything. And I think trust is really doing the small things like that, doing them quickly, doing them with clarity, which I think it is another important point of it, right? Is not just building something and sort of releasing it in the force, but letting people know how this will improve their lives, right?
So, speaking of doing things that would improve people's lives, there are two camps of thought, right? One is we're just going to build everything ourselves because we know best. And then there's the other camp that said, well, we need to leverage our partnership, leverage what other people do best, and together you can create an even better solution. For that latter camp, what advice would you offer to other bank executives or fintech founders who want to partner? Because there's always this notion of working with a bank is immensely difficult because of the layers and that it takes forever. What is important when it comes to partnering between a bank and a fintech?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think really the way I would frame it is that partnership is really about multiplying what's possible for customers. I think I want to go back to that, right? It's not about fintechs doing the work for banks or banks going at it alone. Some of the best breakthroughs I've seen have come from integrating fintech solutions with in-house innovations, right? We did one a year or two ago with Greenlight, right? Um, the biggest lesson I think I have for fintech founders, um, and actually banking executive, is to listen way more than you speak, right? Show, don't tell, right? And when you do spot alignment, and it does happen, I think you got to strike while the iron is hot. I make no apologies for banks and sometimes how big and circuitous they are. They are organizations made up of thousands of individuals. And so we're all human in that sense. But I think if I were to think as a founder or a team, um, as you think about sort of your interaction, there are really sort of three things that come to mind. Um, Banks will often ask for a business case, right? And I will say, set conservative expectations, whether it's the business case, whether it's the experience, but I would say then execute with extreme urgency. Some people would say hurry up and go, but I think that would be number one. I think to that end, I'd want sort of the folks I'm talking to really, really, really understand the single most important business metric you're looking to impact. Uh, don't take sort of that first line of defense that you're talking to as sort of as gospel. Validate the metric with other folks within the organization. Is there really meat behind that? Is there traction behind that? How does that particular metric roll back up to potentially their enterprise strategy or goals, right? I think everything else is bonus, but really sort of honing in on that one metric, be it, is this a non-interest revenue play? Is this a balance increase play? And how is that sort of, how are those goals prioritized today with your potential partner is going to be extremely important. And it's hard. I've been sort of, I would say, an internal sales person at times, right? Is what I feel like. So, just know the system is designed to say no, right? To a certain extent. But I think if you believe in the mission of your product, the value that it will deliver for your customer, for the customer, for the stakeholders, I think there's something really powerful about a bank and fintech partnership. It can be truly symbiotic and good for the customer and the industry. And I have sort of a three areas I tend to look at when I look at partnership. Is it good for the customer? Obviously, is it a good value for the bank from a business case perspective? And is it a good overall, just a great product? If it's good for the fintech, good for the bank, good for the customer, those are the basis on which we go forward.
I think that that's super helpful, and I love how you always put the customer in the middle of everything that you talk about. I think that is immensely important. Looking ahead, gosh, I feel like a year feels like light years right now. Everything is moving so fast. But from your vantage point, what technology do you think will have the biggest impact on consumers' lives, right? Because we're looking at a lot of stuff right now. We're looking at the economy fluctuating.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the cost of living going quite substantially higher. We are looking at consumers dealing with student loans repayment. We're looking at older adults trying to figure out how to tackle healthcare costs. I mean, it's like every corner you look, or small businesses, right? Trying to cope with the fluctuation in the economy. What can we do for them? And what technology do you think will have the biggest impact in our journey to helping them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say that I couldn't answer that by first saying AI is going to get a lot of buzz, right? I think
It has been. It
yeah.
has been.
But I think we believe technology will be whatever interface truly earns customers' trust and truly solves a problem. I mean, that could be a super app, a proactive bot, or just radically better digital experience. If I look in other industries, for example, and I look at things like DoorDash or Instacart and what they've done for grocery shopping, or even during the pandemic, the ability to get a meal, right? um, Sort of that sort of transformative experience, I think, is something we still strive for, right? And I think, saying another way, I don't know that we've gotten there yet as an industry, and I take that as a challenge. I take that as something that really sort of gets me going, right? Gets me out of bed. Who will be the DoorDash of the finance industry, right? Is something that is really sort of exciting. We're trying to be is what I would say. Um, but really, I think what matters, we talk a lot about tech, we talk a lot about sort of innovation, but I think it really still comes down to making life less complicated, right? Empowering these customers, and sometimes something we don't really talk about often, making it emotionally satisfying. There's a lot of emotions tied to finance. How do we improve that? Um, and I do think it's going to be a blend of digital and human, right? I think that banks are uniquely positioned to take advantage of both sort of digital super apps as well as a human infrastructure, whether that's at a branch, whether that's through video chat, or whether that's through the phone. Some would say it can be not just a benefit, but an advantage over sort of more single channel challengers.
I agree. There was a recent study that came out that talked about AI and money and consumers' perception of it. As much as a lot of times we want to automate things to create efficiencies for the organization, on the flip side, I think consumers still overwhelmingly want to see the person that they deal with on the other side use technology but not replace themselves with technology. There's an element of trust, right? It goes back to in the beginning when you were talking about, what do consumers want? Are we building the right thing? And I think precisely what you said is where we can create competitive advantage. And financial institution having that interface to humans using technology to upscale what they do is a perfect sweet spot. Yeah. And before I let you go, I need to ask you this. If there's one wish that you hope our technology or our industry would do using technology, any, what would that be and why?
Well, I think in general, I'd like technology with a capital T to make our financial lives dramatically easier, right? I think when we think about what a father of four in the Midwest thinks about financially, probably different than what a father of four thinks about on the coast, right, or in the South. So how can technology help us bridge that gap? How can technology bring us sort of almost a bank of one, if you will, right? Uniquely personalized for our needs based on our data, our behaviors. But I think that extends not just for customer, but for teams. How does technology make it easier for teams to not just build, but build things that are meaningful, that are valuable, that solve a need? I think the potential is massive. I am a tech geek nerd, whatever label you want to put on me. I know that the technology today makes it massively easier to build apps, but again, apps or features built simply for the sake of building, if it doesn't solve a real customer need, if it's not personalized, if it doesn't democratize something, will be just yet another app that sort of falls into the heap of has been, right? I think I want to hope technology helps people focus more on living life by lowering the threshold and the amount of times they think about their money, right? And I think lastly, as sort of regardless whether you're a bank, a fintech, or just a technology company, we will need to continue to experiment boldly because I think the challenges still remain out there. But we'll always have to be responsible with our guardrails about how exactly we go about that.
Journey to the bank of one and travel boldly and responsibly. I can't wait to see you, hopefully in person soon again. But until then, thank you so much for joining us, Sean. And I do know that you do write quite a bit. Where is the best place for our audience to go find you?
The best place would be on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter that I have neglected for about 3 months, but now that I've launched Banking in a Box, I will have more time, and I've got a lot of topics I'd love to continue to cover in that newsletter.
That's lovely. Well, thank you so much, Sean, again. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all next week.